For a decade, I built schools for kids who had nothing, and now then I came home and found that kids who had everything were still being failed, but in a different way. But there's an equally big challenge when you think about the people who are the best and brightest, the people who have a ton of untapped potential, but are told in a system to just sit around and wait for the next lesson, who are told not to disrupt things. Too often we think of this as a dichotomy, and I think that's a false dichotomy. And really, for me, I would like to say, lowering the ceiling does not raise the floor. If you go after helping kids who are doing well, if you create an environment that allows kids to reach their potential, you're providing something that's a real net benefit to society.
Hello, overviewers. I'm Kent Barton, and it's my distinct pleasure to welcome you, or welcome you back, as the case may be, to the Overview podcast. Our mission is to give you insights and learnings to help you navigate the future more successfully. And you're in for a hell of a treat today. If you're anything like me, you've probably been thinking a lot lately of all the implications of AI. This is truly something that's going to impact almost every facet of life that you can imagine, except maybe like hiking in the mountains or something. But one of the elements that comes to mind is what that means for education. Whether you have kids and are wondering, what does this mean for their future and their education, and how they might position themselves, or just sort of the broader impact of what's going to happen. Because after all, the manner in which children learn today and how that's influenced by these new tools is really going to determine, and I don't think this is hyperbole, the future course of humanity. So this is big, important stuff. Fortunately, we have the perfect person to talk about this today. If you've been wondering about education, it's I can't think of a better person to sort of guide us along. So today's guest is Arvind Nagarajan. He spent his career at the intersection of education, technology, and capital. He's convinced that the way we teach our kids is fundamentally misaligned with the world they're about to inherit. And I think he has a pretty compelling case for what sort of the institutionalized system writ large is getting wrong right now. He's dedicated much of his life to improving learning outcomes, and currently he's building GT School, a new model of a K-12 education designed from the ground up for this modern era and for AI tools, as well as GT Anywhere, a virtual school for advanced learners. Welcome to the show, Arvind.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
With all that as a nice lead-in, at a high level, what is GT, and how does it differ from Alpha, which is, of course, top of mind for a lot of people in the space, and even its predecessor for you, Astra?
Yeah, so GT is basically, it's the answer to the question of what would you build for schools who've been abandoned, for kids who've been abandoned by the education system. Not the struggling kids, but the brilliant ones. So if you take kids that really love learning, that are really academically inclined, how would you build a school from the ground up? So we use the same technology as Alpha. Just to step back, the whole Alpha universe uses this platform called Time Back that basically does AI adaptive personalized learning to compress your core academics into roughly 2 hours per day. And so the initial thought process around this was, how do you deliver 2x the learning in 2 hours? And so when you started that process, in Alpha, they noticed there were two types of families. There were those that said, oh, 2 hours, that sounds awesome. Like my kid doesn't like school. Like, what else can you do with that time to learn more effectively, learn more things that are more relevant? And then there were families that said, 2x, that sounds awesome. Like, what could it be 3x? Could it be 4x? There were those that, latched onto that side of the equation. And so GT was really born from that and saying, what if we took that and said, how would we architect that from the ground up? It's not for kids who actually like school, who love learning. How would we architect what that looks like? So we, GT is the brainchild of that, for the kids who finish the worksheets before anyone else, who stop raising their hand. And so this is like a K through 8 school system built around two beliefs: that every child deserves a world-class education, and that there's basically with the right AI-powered learning system, you can deliver it. So basically, these kids are able to accelerate and find their tribe, and go deeper in the sciences and humanities to build their life skills.
So we're not talking just STEM with GT. It's kind of cross-spectrum, cross-discipline.
Totally. Yeah. So we think of it like, again, we think of it as the sciences and humanities both. So we want to go deeper into the engineering, robotics side, but also into the performing arts, the writing side. The humanities side is also like a hugely interesting element for gifted kids, and one that you can really go deeper on. Given the right time. Again, the whole construct is you get your time back, and what are you going to do with it? And for kids that love learning, we want to be able to foster those curiosities in different ways. The umbrella that we kind of think of it as is we want to have these gardens of ambition. We want to plant seeds, plant curiosities, and allow them to sprout in different ways for different kids.
Right. That's a beautiful visual. I mean, I'm kind of thinking back to how it was to be a child and have that sense of everything is new and amazing. And when you cultivate those environments, it's incredible. As opposed to, I imagine, a lot of typical conventional classrooms, maybe they're sort of moribund, they're stuck, and there's probably a lack of maybe excitement sometimes. So this sounds like a fertile environment for learning.
Yeah, I love the garden analogy. You can't blame any individual. The system itself, it has, you have a lot of constraints that you're dealing with. With the one-size-fits-all curriculum, it's always going to be challenging to try to meet children at all the standards that you have to get through. And so for us, really, the enabler is an amazing core platform to allow you to get through your core academics, free up that time, and then it's our job to think about what you do with that. And the garden metaphor, I think, is really, really good, because you can plant seeds, you can set up the environment, you want to set up that soil so it's rich, you want to have the right sunlight, you want to have the right environment, but different seeds will grow at different times. And it's one of those things where, ambition's contagious. And so if you're around other like-minded kids that are also seeking growth and are fostering that in different ways, some of that will be through competitions, like, kids who really love chess or Quiz Bowl. And then some of that will be through writing and like writing your own book, or launching your own speaking business, or going deep into the coding engineering side. So all those different ways in which those curiosities can be fostered is, I think, a real treat for us to try to get to design that environment for the kids.
Absolutely. And you've been building this garden for a while, even predating GT. Of course, you've had many years of experience in the educational space. Astra was sort of a predecessor of sorts. If I saw correctly, it's sort of been just weaved into GT. It's sort of informed GT. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, my educational story started like I'm the son of Indian immigrants. My mom's a professor at the University of Michigan, and so teaching's been in the blood. Education's been there. I started my education career working in low-cost private schools in Asia and Africa. So, first really thinking about how do you raise the floor in education, and thinking about how you get kids literate and numerate, because these were schools that were reaching massive scale and trying to serve as an effective alternative in markets where a lot of parents just didn't have good choices for educational options. Then I spent time working in the American education system and started realizing that I was for a decade I built schools for kids who had nothing, and then I came home and found that kids who had everything were still being failed, but in a different way. And so that kind of led to the birth of Astra, thinking like, the key insight that I came down to one thing: like, kids are capable of more than we ever imagine. And it's never been a better time to be a kid than today. Like, if you're a kid today and you want to start a business, it's never been easier than now. If you wanted to write a book, it's never been easier than now. If you had a passion that you really care about, it's never been easier to go deep in exploring it than now. Yet at the same time, the educational system seemed to be one in which there were just a lot of hoops that you were designing to jump through. And it was like trying to rob kids of agency at every turn. And so once I saw that, it was just like I couldn't unsee it. And so that led to the birthplace of like, what would it look like to try to cultivate high agency kids? That was the birthplace of Astra, and that's like what that mission and ethos has really kept and woven into GT in every way.
Excellent. My mom's from the Chicagoland area, and I know a Midwest accent when I hear one. I was wondering where you might be from. I imagine
Yep.
Michigan itself, living there, that must have been a hell of a contrast to the kind of the local schools, but then seeing how things operate abroad at a younger age must have been
totally. Like if you're a kid growing up in suburban Michigan, it's like it's a wonderful place. I had a wonderful educational system growing up that gave me a lot of opportunity. My parents lived the American dream, but then I spent my summers in Chennai. You really see the educational equity firsthand, and you see like how big how big the zip code you're in really matters. And so that's something that's always informed me in terms of thinking like how do we give kids access to a quality education, no matter where they are and who they are.
Right. It shouldn't be the case that so much of your own destiny is based on the zip code and those things. Just to draw an important delineation, GT is not, it would be overstretching and overstating it to say it's AI based, but it's an in-person thing, at least that component. The anywhere, of course, is remote. But you guys are leaning in heavily to the AI. I just wanted to kind of explore that and also get your take on just the confluence of AI and education. I guess just for starters, Arvind, like how has your own like day-to-day workflow in the business and building this business kind of been changed by LLMs and AI tools over, say, the past year? What are you doing differently now?
Oh, I can't. It has been a massive change. I will say, like it feels like a rocket ship is is taking off from an AI point of view, and it's like you're just trying to hold on for dear life. So I devote an hour every day to just working with AI. Like that's become part of my workflow, and now Claude Code and Perplexity are my two tools of use, my most frequent right now. And I would say it's something where it's hard to give like a static view because things are changing so fast on this front. And it's hard when, in schools, there's so much operational work to be done that it can be hard to say, okay, like how are you going to carve out time for this? But to me, the opportunity cost has become too high to ignore. You have to really think about, from an operational standpoint, we have massive ambition to try to reach 100,000 kids over the next 10 years. And the only way we're going to be able to achieve that ambition is to leverage AI in really serious ways from an operational standpoint, to be able to look at how we expand physical sites, how we can actually serve our community really, really well, how we can take those insights. And so to me, I think there's been a huge element in terms of just personally speaking. Now, when I'm working with my team and trying to think of like ideas that we have, there's no such thing as an idea anymore. Anything that I have as an idea, I fully conceptualize with Claude Code, develop a working prototype, ship it to the person that's responsible and say, this is what I'm thinking about. Here's how I've like conceptualized it. So it's not just them trying to read my mind. They can fully see what I've already taken it. I've essentially half baked the idea, and it's just about getting the architecture right and getting that to be deployed at scale. So that's completely changed how we think about how fast we can go from idea to execution, and allowed us to iterate like way faster. But to address the first part, just to think about what we do at GT School and like the educational side of AI, I think it's really important to think about this because, it's really interesting. Like for me, it's one thing to think about how I adapt and embrace AI tools as an adult that's gone through and understand I have my own voice. I know how to write. There's certain things that I've cultivated through an educational system. It's a different thing to think about what are kids, how are we teaching kids today, and what are we hoping they're going to get out of that system. And so I think the current construct of the debate around AI is really flawed when it comes to education. Too much of it is happening around chatbots, and like that is the absolute wrong way to integrate AI into education. Like most kids are using chatbots to cheat. It's not really helping kids in any meaningful way. It's outsourcing their thinking, and frankly, like disservice to them from an educational point of view. For us, the integration is really from a core academic standpoint. How do we create how do we embrace the promise of personalized learning that's been around for 20 plus years in American education? How do we get that flight simulator approach where people are getting the exact right level of difficulty content for them and being able to embrace the challenges that come associated with that, be able to get redirected the right way, to kind of have a world-class coach that's getting you exactly what you need to be able to move forward. That's to us the right way of personalized content, getting the exact right difficulty. We can go deeper into that, but that's to me how we orient in terms of using AI to allow these kids to move through their core academics at a pace that was previously unimaginable.
I'd love to hear more about kind of the blocking and tackling and tactics of how you're doing that. First, I guess at a broader level, though, it's fascinating that you mentioned the personalization aspect. I was just watching an interesting kind of summary video. I would say overview. That's a little. I don't want to confuse people. But a nice summary of the broad trends of what's going to happen with AI. One of my own suspicions or one of my own hunches is that increasingly agents and AI, other AI tools, are just going to replace human activity on the internet in general, whether it's e-commerce and other things. In other words, websites won't be so important. It'll be these connecting directly to APIs and MPC servers and these tools. And you can get really technical, but considering how powerful these tools are now and how quickly the technology is evolving, I think things will look vastly different. One interesting point this gentleman made, though, on top of that, is kind of this trend towards increasing personalization for anything you do, really, in the online realm. In other words, maybe let's say an agent knows you, Arvind, you're into this, these particular interests. You're not crazy about this. You're planning a trip somewhere, and knowing all that inherently, just because it works with you all the time, you don't even visit a general public website in the future. You visit an Arvind website that they've customized for you instantly on the fly based on your preferences. It seems like that there's a pretty good chance that's where things might be headed. The personalization aspect is fascinating too with respect to education, because when you think about it, like one size fits all approach is a little bit kind of ham-fisted. Yeah. So this is fascinating. It also, like, another broader challenge is like, okay, how do you think about educating kids in an environment when all the preconceived notions are getting turned on their heads? In other words, back in the day, back like 3, 5, 7 years ago plus, the standard way of doing things was, okay, send your child to a good college. They can get a STEM related degree, perhaps get involved in law or medicine, or there were certain sure things to really put them on a very bright career path. But now this is, like, just to take computer programming, for example, completely changed. Like you mentioned Claude Code. I've been using it as well to build software, not a programmer. Doesn't matter now. So totally. Given that aspect, given the fact that everything is sort of getting turned on its head, how are you approaching, like, preparing these kids, these high agency kids, for an environment where maybe their classic knowledge work and those skills aren't necessarily your ticket to a bright future?
Yeah. So let me be a little bit of a cautionary voice on this process, on this talk, because I would say if you look at the last 20 years, at least the time I've spent in education, that talk track has been around long before AI came around. Like around, okay, like what is college going to be relevant? What are the skills that are going to happen? And that, that has always been the case where it's always just around the corner. But at the end of the day, people end up, selecting colleges for reasons that go beyond the actual core learning that you get from that. There's status that goes on that will kind of like eventually always be a part of what we are as a species. So some of that, I'm less of a prognosticator on that front in terms of saying, okay, like this college is going away, the college degree is dead, let's say. And what I really love about what this allows us to do is to say, in a personalized learning pathway, in a way where we're trying to optimize for efficiency, we can have our cake and eat it too. Like here in GT school, our 8th graders are already scoring above a 1400 on the SAT. So we're not saying forget college. There's no, this is not, we're trying to say we can actually compress what you have to do to check the box from a college standpoint to leave that path open. We don't have to spend the whole day doing, we're not a school that says forget your core academics. We're all about, the life skills. We're a school that says we can do this more efficiently. We can allow, these bright kids to accelerate, to allow them to take AP classes while they're still in middle school. We can do this way more efficiently, what the current system is designed for. And that leaves us the space to say, how do we build our life skills through the sciences and humanities? How do we shape kids for a world that is uncertain, that's highly unpredictable, where there might be very big differences in terms of what your future looks like coming out of middle school, high school, wherever beyond? We want these kids to come with the grit, resilience, the entrepreneurial ability to be able to shape their own path. We want these kids to be high agency individuals. And the path to doing so, again, from our standpoint, there's been a lot of failed education innovations in the past that have kind of really forced that trade-off and said, okay, like you have to reject the system. There's no college path for you if you go this route. And that to me cannot be the answer, because that's always something that's, while it may be around the corner, while it may come, it's not the pathway to really reinventing education, because that's not where most of your families sit. That's not where a parent, when you're thinking about it, it's easy to think about that from an abstract point of view. But when you're thinking about your child, you really don't want, you're not ready to throw out the bathwater yet. You're still thinking, okay, there's something to this system that has existed that served me well, whatever it may be.
Absolutely. You alluded to sort of the shortcomings also of AI in terms of really getting kids ready for the future. Chatbots are very, they maybe can replace rote learning. You can use it for, of course, cheating or just quickly knowing things or doing things. Of course, you could say the calculators are the same way with math, and it's not like STEM is useless because we have calculators. It seems to me, and I'm no expert on education, but one of the things I've observed over and over again, whether it was in different countries or even how things work here in the States, is like just the importance of critical and independent thought. Yes. I think this is, more than anything, you could argue is going to be like one of the foundational things to help kids succeed in the future. And maybe that's also one of the most important roles for schooling in general. Yes, you drill down, teach them specific things, but how, really getting that culture of critical thinking. How do you use AI to do that at GT?
Yeah. So let me separate this into two things. So when you think about AI, like I just think people should really embrace the fact that there's a different mental model than chatbot. Like the AI is really should be thought of as the infrastructure, not the interface. Like it's like, here's what you're doing to actually personalize the learning experience. So for example, if you're learning to read and write, why not allow little Kent to say, okay, here's your way of being able to learn to read with content that's really relevant to what you care about. You really like Spider-Man comics. Here's what we're going to have. We're going to be able to create the right reading level for you to be able to embrace your learning path in content that speaks to you, where you're not having, you can get that pathway that allows you to really unlock your motivational ability to continue moving through. And so I would say from our standpoint, when we think of this, we really want to separate, like your point is so right in terms of thinking about critical thinking. And I would take it one step further, which is in my opinion, really writing is the process of thinking. And, being able to write clearly is such a great way of being able to articulate your thoughts, ensure that you have a clear point of view. And so to us, there's a lot of that writing process that is done, again, from a personalized standpoint, from an evaluation standpoint, we use AI, but our kids are not using chatbots to generate their essays. They're writing, they're learning the structure of good grammar, the structure of putting together a good sentence, a good paragraph, a good essay to make arguments well. And that's where we also really lean on the actual element of developing a great debate team, being able to like have that argumentative skills, the critical thinking, those types of things are crucial to our development. The way we think about it is from a core academic standpoint. When you're developing those writing abilities, if you're using AI in those mornings when we're doing core academics, you're cheating. You're completely wasting your effort. In our afternoons, when we're thinking about how we foster this ambition, how we can let kids go deeper, if you're not using AI, you're failing. We want these kids to be using AI to supercharge their ambition, to supercharge what's possible for what they can actually deliver, how far they can go, and how fast. And so that's the kind of construct. So I would say from a critical thinking standpoint, we really don't. A lot of those core skills, we don't lean on AI too heavily. It's more on the infrastructure side from an evaluation standpoint, from a personalization standpoint, but it's not to, we really want the kids to develop those thinking skills, and that has to happen independently of the AI.
So not to put words in your mouth, but it sort of sounds like you're alluding to maybe like timeless principles in gifted and talented education, things that are equally valid in both the pre-AI and post-AI eras.
Oh, totally. Yeah, like the idea like the skills, the life skills that we talk about in terms of developing the critical thinking ability, in terms of developing your communication, your persuasion skills. Those existed long before, and actually, like, I think they will only be accelerated, their importance in an AI enabled world.
Seems likely. In terms of like, okay, how AI can actually extend these superpowers around, gifted and talented to children everywhere. You have a beautiful vision, and you're already improving the lives of children with GT. In a perfect world, your approach could perhaps be scaled to kids anywhere. How do you think these new tools specifically in the future could be extended in a way that it helps creates a brighter future for kids anywhere on the planet?
Well, I think it's really important to think of it as like AI as a complement to what's the most important part of education, which is the human to human connection. Like a lot of these skills that you're developing are coming through humans, and that is for us, like that AI as an enabler for that human connection has to be the fundamental grounding principle behind scaling AI in education. AI as a replacement for teachers is, I think, the absolute wrong construct. And so when you think of scaling this, to me it's, how do you think of AI as really being that flight simulator, that coach that can really personalize content and allow kids to get through the core academic, like the blocking and tackling of getting through your fundamental numeracy, literacy, your ability to, read, write, and articulate yourself in a meaningful way. And then how do you allow teachers' roles to be reimagined and what, everyone can think of the teachers that changed their life, and it wasn't generally because they were content experts. It was because of the way they saw you as a person, the way they connected with you, inspired you to think bigger than you thought and dream bigger than you thought was possible. And so that's fundamentally what the role of a teacher is has to be. And we want to, I think the vision for this in a future is, how do you accelerate that? How do you allow that to be the core of that role, instead of the teacher being bogged down in 100 different administrative tasks and trying to deliver content in a way that's, trying to reach a wide variety of students at different levels. And to me, it's like, how do you simplify that job spec, allow great humans to do that great mentoring? And that's the only way in which AI, to me, will have a really positive impact on the educational landscape, is if we get that framing right and allow, and really get teachers bought into that reinvention of the role and what's possible there.
This word that keeps coming up, human, I think it's a good reminder that, even though we're on not even the precipice, we're in the middle of this technological revolution that's going to massively change things. It's a good reminder not to get caught up in some of the deeper hyperbole. Like at the end of the day, we're humans using the tech. We're not robots or cyborgs yet. Maybe someday, but especially with something like education, you're talking, what's more human than teaching children. And so, kind of framing this, it's simply another tool to make that happen. I like that approach.
Yes.
Kind of zooming out to some rather than just the context of AI in education, but talking about some of the big educational themes. I don't want to spend too much time belaboring this point, because it's almost a cliche, but it really is true. So kind of setting the table generally in terms of education in the U.S. Per capita, we spend a ton. I think something about like the fifth most of any country per capita on K through 12 education. Like maybe around 40% more than average. And generally, we get middling results. It's not. There's a sense that we don't get out what we put in. Meanwhile, you can point to a lot of other countries that maybe have a better return on their investment. For example, a lot of countries in Asia, where they take education more seriously, although they arguably maybe lack that culture of critical thinking. But anyway, the conventional wisdom is that, okay, our educational system is broken. But Arvind, you certainly strike me as more of an optimist who might challenge this sort of, we're all kind of screwed in this area type of paradigm, and offer reasons for hope. So given the data and kind of just where we're at right now, why should we as Americans be optimistic about the future of education here?
Well, to me, what I would say is from a policy standpoint, where right now in America, there's this huge opportunity with ESAs, this education savings accounts. These are essentially vouchers that allow parents to select where their child goes to school. So if you don't go to public school, you get some portion of the dollars that would have been allocated to you from a public funding standpoint for you to select the school of your choice. And so now 36 states, I think, around the country have some sort of ESA program, and there's soon to be potentially a federal program in the works. And so, look, there's a lot of political viewpoints on what vouchers. There tends to be a political divide between vouchers and charters, let's say. But to me, fundamentally, it's an opportunity where you say, okay, like parents can vote with their feet in a way that's never been possible before. And so, there's going to be greater demand for new solutions and new alternatives than ever before. So the reason for optimism is, to me, that's an opportunity. And if we get the right builders in education, like that's why to me it's like never been a better time to be a builder in education, because now we have a playground that's never been bigger in America, and we can say, okay, like right now we launched GT Anywhere. And this is a virtual offering. How can we thought, okay, we have this great physical school for GT school that's really working well. How would we actually be able to think, Texas is launching this new voucher program where every child has access to $10,474 to go to a private school. And so we say, what if we said, how could we take this to a virtual setting? And we, thought about, obviously, the academics through an AI adaptive learning platform. A lot of that we can do asynchronously. We can do in a virtual environment. How do we think about these workshops, these life skills, these elements in that way? And that offers us an opportunity to now reach families across Texas. We're going to be probably the biggest gifted community across Texas in the fall. And that's an amazing opportunity. And we hope there's like a million more. This is like a chance for 1,000 flowers to bloom, and to say, okay, here are the opportunities. And the only way this works, we know the demand is going to be there. Like this is an opportunity, and the supply side is what matters. So to me, if you're a builder in education, this is the time to really think about how can you get creative from a solution standpoint. How can you provide broader access? And that's the possibility that gives me hope that there's a path forward where, again, like, with more choice, parents can select what's right for their children. They can see the different offerings, and then, the cream can rise to the top in terms of what's providing value and outcomes to students.
You heard it from the man himself. There's never been a better time to get building in the educational environment. I know we have a lot of builders and entrepreneurs in the overview community and its listenership. So that's inspiring to hear. Just before we delve in more, can you kind of draw the distinction between ESAs and vouchers for listeners who are unfamiliar? They're similar, but they're kind of not the same.
They're kind of they're slightly interchangeable terms. So like the ESA term is basically this umbrella that's captures, like, it's called education savings account. So it's basically a different way in which, in some form or fashion, different states do it in different ways, but you're essentially getting money back if you don't put your kid into public school. And so in most situations, those terms can be used interchangeably. It just depends. Sometimes the funding goes directly to the parent for them to spend on a wide variety of services. So some of those they can spend on, ancillary services like tutoring or, coaching of some sort. Some it's more restrictive in terms of like the funding actually goes directly to an institution that you select. It never touches the parent account, for example. So some of those states work differently from an administrative standpoint in terms of whether or not it's technically a voucher that hits the parent account. But the ESA is the broad umbrella term that kind of hits the same idea, which is basically the dollar comes to the parent if they're not in public school.
Gotcha. So maybe a critical difference is vouchers inherently mean that you're giving money directly to an institution, whereas it's sort of like a bit of a potential unbundling depending on how ESA is employed, where you could be spending money as a parent on, you have this chunk of change, $10K a year or whatever, to spend on tuition, tutoring, therapy, curriculum, things like that.
Yes.
In certain states.
Exactly.
Vouchers, of course, these have been a bit of a political lightning rod since, even the 80s. often opposed by teachers unions and a lot of the educational establishment. Have you found, Arvind, that on a nationwide basis, that opposition is dying down so much, or somewhat, as maybe there's more and more success stories around vouchers, and of course, yes, traditional education is continuing as well, or does this remain sort of a red state, blue state kind of dividing line?
It still tends to be a little bit more drawn on. I would say when you look at the data, when you start at the ground level of like where parents are at, from a polling standpoint, it cuts across lines. Then you're looking at 70-80% of parents support school choice as a construct. When you move up to the government level, then it does tend to split more along party lines. I'm not someone like I'm a builder. I'm an operator. I don't play in the culture war side of things. Like, to me, I look at the question of what does a particular child need to reach their full potential, and how do you use the tools that are at your disposal to try to make that possible. And so that doesn't have a partisan answer to me. I look at it and saying ESAs are on the playing field now, whether or not you support them or not. We've kind of moved, the ship has sailed. Texas has launched the biggest school choice program in the country. The federal program is coming. We are in a phase where this is a tool on the playing field. And if you're a builder in this space and you're not using it, then you're really, I think, leaving something to be desired in terms of what the possibilities are for access and delivering for children.
Kind of along similar lines, but getting back to GT specifically, walk me through who's actually applying to GT. Like, what do these families look like? Is it like realistically like sort of a single mom working 2 jobs in rural Texas who might find your school? Is it sort of parents from more typical kind of background that might be sending their kid to a GT school? Namely maybe they're both white collar professionals. They're kind of in a certain paradigm, or is it like a mix of all of the above, thanks to the broader scope that ESAs have presented here?
Yeah. Okay. So right now with GT Anywhere, we've had a real spark in seeing this. We've seen thousands of families express interest. We now have over 300 students enrolled for the fall, and probably will have hundreds more by the time fall comes around. And so it's we've had to see this, and really I would say it breaks down across 3 archetypes for me. There's, again, like, every family is different, but that's if I were to bucket it, I would say one is there's this homeschooling family. There's people who don't have a lot of means that are really like, they have kids who are bright that are just like, they can't feed them enough at home. Like, their appetite for learning is too great. And they're like, this has been, this is a godsend for me in terms of being able to say, now my kid can accelerate. Now my kid can actually have their appetite for learning quenched, and find a tribe of like people who are like them. And so those are people who really, I think, they come from more rural areas. They're across the economic spectrum, and these are families that would never have had access to this without the ability of like ESAs to be able to enable this as an opportunity. The second is like those who are in like a public system. They're kind of fed up. Their kid is bored, disengaged. They're being told to like tutor other kids in the class, or it's manifesting in some sort of behavioral issues, not because the kid has any issue, but actually because they're not being given anything to learn during their school day. And so these parents have been like, God, I'm fed up with this. And now this comes around and is offering an alternative for them. And so these are often professionals. They're looking at this but they're like, hey, look, this is an opportunity for my kid to actually be challenged, to actually have an opportunity to accelerate to their potential, to get content that is, that's catered to them. So they're not stuck learning 5th grade math when they're ready for calculus. That's for us, the ability to say your age doesn't matter. It's your level of mastery, and you're able to move at the pace that you want, is a huge unlock. And the ability to be able to surround them with electives that fuel that passion, fuel that fire, and allow them to fill that school day in an interesting way, is really exciting for them. And then the third archetype that was surprising to us is we find there are more of like wealthy families that look at this and they say, actually, we're like reasonably happy with our school, except for the academics. And so you're like, okay, so like they're like, okay, it's a good It's a good culture. They're around, they're around good people, but they're not learning anything. But like, I don't want to pull them out of school. And they're like, can we just use this? Can we use this for academic acceleration? Can we use this as a supplement? Can we try to use this? And so that's been interesting to see, like these families who are coming to us to say, okay, they want to get the academic side of being able to get a personalized learning experience. They recognize the one-size-fits-all curriculum isn't really serving their kid, but they look at the other elements of a physical school that, in a community that they care about. And we're coming with more physical schools for that reason as well. We recognize there's value to a lot of families and what that looks like. And so this provides something in the interim for them to be able to give their kids allow their academic thirst to be quenched.
It's fascinating that even in these relatively early stages with GT, you're seeing some very clearly delineated market segments emerge, kind of along the business lines. Also, just thinking about what it entails to actually be a business owner and a founder in this space, and in general, somebody that's operating in our crazy modern world. I saw you posted recently on LinkedIn that building GT School is like one of the hardest things you've ever done, harder than working at Bain Capital, harder than running schools across like 3 continents, and harder than Astra, which I imagine presented a lot of interesting challenges. But what's made it so difficult, or what are some of the unique challenges that you're facing as you build out the school?
Well, I would say it's really the level. Like, I've never been at a place where and at a time where the level of urgency has never felt higher. Like, education typically is a place where inertia is the overriding force, in many cases. And that can lead to, in a lot of education, a lot of status quo bias, a lot of like, oh, we'll worry about this for next school year. But the thing about inertia is that, like, if you're a physics nerd like me, like, it works in both ways. Like, actually, when you have a lot of momentum, then it's like, that momentum carries forward in the same way. And so here, the culture is around such urgency around this is a problem to be solved, not next school year, not in a decade, but today. And that just really rewires your thinking. Like, when we launched GT Anywhere, it wasn't like, oh, we'll launch this in the fall. We were like, okay, like, how do we launch this in February? Like, we were in January thinking, okay, let's launch this in February. And we had pulled together the team. We now have 45 kids that are in the program. And like, that to me would have been unimaginable in any other construct. How would you launch something not on a school year cycle? But we had families that wanted it, and we said, okay, we'll figure it out. We'll hire the people. We'll figure, like, it was very much building the plane as you fly it. It's scary on one hand to think about that as someone who's a perennial if anyone who's spent time in consulting, you learn to under promise and over deliver. To go into this and be a little bit more humble and say, we're going fast, we're going to make mistakes, and it's been awesome to see, like, embrace a community that values that and, like, is in that journey with you. And that's it's been really nice to see, like, these founding families and them and the embracing from a culture standpoint of really going after what's possible. So yeah, that's to me, it's just the pure velocity. And then, like, because it's a double-edged sword when you have AI as such an enabler for what you can do, what you can bring to life, and the speed and velocity you can do so. It doesn't mean that you do the same amount faster. It just means that your scope gets bigger and your ambition grows larger. And so it's like it doesn't, it just means you're working harder and you're trying to do even more things at a faster velocity. And so that to me has made it challenging. But again, like, I'll take challenge over boredom any day, just like the kids who come to GT.
I noticed you focus a lot on storytelling, both for your students and in your own work. That this idea is so powerful, I think, in business. You think about I think my favorite example of storytelling is the classic Steve Jobs and Apple. It's 1984. It's literally 1984, and here comes somebody with the hammer and destroying the Orwellian big blue mainframes. And holy crap, that really worked. That's kind of how things played out. Apple's not perfect, but it was truly this, like, brilliant narrative of personal computing as a liberating force. Given all that, and given kind of what you've done and experienced, and how you're leveraging the power of stories, like, what advice would you have for business owners and founders about how to leverage storytelling their own way and in a way that really pushes them and their business forward?
Yeah, well, to me, yeah, I really believe that wholeheartedly, that storytelling is the most important superpower that you can have as an individual trying to drive change, and that whatever your role in an organization, like whatever, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're if you're doing anything, to me, owning the story of what you're trying to deliver is so crucial because I think of this from a GT standpoint. I get the opportunity to tell the story of like what I see as like a super compelling vision around how, we can raise the ceiling on what's possible, and there's this huge possibility of saying we can take our, we're leaving our best and brightest kids behind, and here's how we can reimagine that. And when you can tell the story the right way, people are not convinced by data. They're convinced by stories. And that is fundamentally, like, that's always going to be the case. We are a storytelling species. And this is the way you build the people. You can get people behind any vision you have, anything you want to get done. And so spending time, my advice is like, you really do want to spend the time honing in on what that story is. It's worth spending the time to iterate on what those words are, to really get it crisp and neat, because once you have that down, if you can replay that story enough, that's going to become the culture of your organization. That's going to become the culture of the people that are around you, and that's going to permeate and manifest in ways that you just couldn't have imagined. And like that's the beautiful thing about an organization. It's like your power is amplified. You create a story, and then people who buy into that story start to take ownership of it in different ways, in ways that you had never envisioned. And that can come, like, the ways in which GT has really grown is really a testament to the people, not just our students, not just our families, but our teachers, our staff, like the people who are in GT, who take ownership of this and think about what's possible and how we can think, knowing that this is our vision, this is what we're doing, what are the ways in which we can make that manifest. And so to me, like, there's nothing more powerful than spending time getting that right, because it's a force multiplier on everything you do.
I love how you kind of tied that all together at the end, because this is something that you can kind of throw into like mission and vision buckets. It's this abstract thing. Oh, you're telling a story. Yes, everybody has a story, but it really is informing sort of like the day-to-day work of the business. That to me is powerful. And dear listeners, when I say that Arvind is into stories, I'm not just like, this isn't hyperbole. The man actually wrote a sci-fi book, which I'm a sci-fi geek, Arvind. So this, yes, just briefly, like, I thought that was so cool. But like, who are your favorite authors? What are some of your favorite books?
Yeah. So I'm a huge, like, I actually am really like one of my hot takes is I think reading fiction is like one of the most important things you can do. I think like too much right now, there's like this whole zeitgeist of like people just reading like business books and, the self-help genre, let's say, or productivity genre. But to me, nothing can beat fiction in terms of replacing, like, if you can suspend disbelief and enter a different world, that's like the best way to really reimagine your worldview and think of things differently. So in terms of authors that I love, Salman Rushdie, I think, is amazing. Like, I really love this concept of magical realism. What he does and paints different worlds is, to me, really beautiful. Midnight's Children is one example of that, and there are plenty of others. I also really have really loved Ken Follett, like Pillars of the Earth, those books. And then there's the old I just went through this with my kids. Actually, I used AI to like create this personalized curriculum, and we went through over the last couple of years, and we delved into it's called the Mahabharata, and this is one of the oldest. It's actually like one of the oldest stories ever told. It's kind of the ancient epic of Hindu literature, and it's this amazing tale of it's kind of like a comparable to the Odyssey, let's say, or the Iliad. And it's unbelievable. There's like a comic version that's accessible to anyone, and it is such an amazing story. For me, like, that was the time reading that story is the way I learned not to think in black and white and to think in shades of gray. You realize that there's no such thing as good or evil. There is everything comes in shades of gray, and that was like a lesson that I could never have. It was so viscerally brought to life through the characters in this story, and finding what's thought to be a bad guy, but actually had this keen sense of justice. So to me, those are a few that I would recommend. I could go on forever because reading is one of the things that despite whatever else happens in my life, I remain an avid reader through and through.
Likewise. Yeah, and it's great not to get sucked into just reading in your own lane, so to speak. You mentioned Salman Rushdie. It reminded me of, have you read Orientalism by Edward Said?
No, I haven't.
Fascinating. And this is nonfiction, but it talks about basically how here in the West, we wound up adopting this lens that we see the East through, say Asia and the Middle East. And it's fascinating, basically showing that the misconceptions and preconceptions we have here in the West are sort of misguided. It's been a while since I read it, but this is kind of the high level. But it sort of taught me that how much, or I guess the value in actually thinking for yourself when it comes to especially other cultures and places. One of the beautiful things about traveling is you get to see for yourself how things are, and it's not filtered through the government or
Yes.
the media or your friends with their own sort of preconceived notions.
Yes, totally.
Kind of we covered some really interesting, powerful stuff here, but in terms of just takeaways for the audience, if you could guarantee that the listener is going to walk away with just one powerful, learning or remembering one thing from our conversation today, what would that be?
Well, to me, it would be the fact that we're leaving our bright kids behind right now, and they're worth thinking about is like a really powerful thing that I hope people can take away. We tend to think of the education crisis as one in which it's our, the people who lack access to resources or who are struggling to get literate, numerate. But there's an equally big challenge when you think about the people who are the best and brightest, the people who have a ton of untapped potential, but are told in a system to just sit around and wait for the next lesson, who are told not to disrupt things. And to me, these are the people that if we can shape them correctly, if we can give them the right resources, their potential for really shaping society in a better way, for solving some of the huge societal challenges that we're going to face over the coming decades, presented, with AI, with all the other things that are coming. We need to really leverage this. Our leaders, have them develop that critical thinking, have them develop the ability to look at the world in a really creative and meaningful way. And so I would say too often we think of this as a dichotomy, and I think that's a false dichotomy. And really for me, I would like to say lowering the ceiling does not raise the floor. If you go after helping kids who are doing well, if you create an environment that allows kids to reach their potential, you're providing something that's a real net benefit to society. So that's what I hope people can really think about, because everyone in their life has someone that they know who's like a real bright kid, someone who has something, and it doesn't take much to try to foster that curiosity, because so much of their life right now is probably spent being stifled in some way or another. And so if you can be that person that says, here's some new tools, here's something that can unlock that curiosity, that might be the little shift that can help one child in one way. And you don't know how. To me, those little ripple effects are the only way we make real change. Well
said about the ceiling. I think that can apply to so much of how we approach politics and the economy and society. Chopping down a forest of beautiful trees to the same level does not improve the lot of those trees. Really quickly, just in terms of people finding you, following your work, just Google GT School. Is that a good place to go?
Yes, yeah. Go to gt.school, or if you're interested in the virtual side, anywhere.gt.school. You'll find what we're delivering there. And yeah, please do reach out if you have any questions. We're actively growing in terms of building our team and in terms of reaching families. So it's a great time to be in education, and yeah, hope to interact more with the community here.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Arvind, very much for joining us. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening today. Stay curious, and we'll see you next time. Take care.